Well, I'm a little rusty, but I think our game plan, and we haven't really done a whole lot of prep on this thing, but I think each of the panels is going to give a little brief introduction so you kind of have a handle on what our background is. As Dr. Michelis just mentioned, well, my background, I started at Creighton. I was a journalism major at Creighton, and got out of school, went down to Shenandoah, Iowa, was in the newspaper sports center for like 2 years, and then came up to Omaha, and I did PR for the last 40-some years, 13 at Mutual and 32 at the Med Center. So I've wore both the media hat and I've wore the PR hat, I guess, in my lifetime. And I guess just my personal thought, I was raised to trust the media. You know, back when I went to school at Creighton, they taught us to tell, our job as journalists was to tell the truth. We had to be objective. We told both sides of the stories, and we'd get in trouble if we didn't do that. And so I think that's kind of changed over the years a little bit, and I think that's probably where we're going to go into a little bit of how has the media changed over the years, and maybe have our panelists will explore that with us. But on that note, Patrick, why don't you give a little bit about your role in this thing tonight?
I got called. I came. I got notes. So I'll try to give some of the legal background. That's what I'll try to do.
I worked at the World Herald for a little over 40 years and retired at the end of 2019. My career, I moved into different jobs every 3 years. But I was mostly an editor. I was a reporter for some period of time, and worked with teams of editors while I was there. And then the last 4 years, I was the editorial page editor. Retired at the end of 2019 and stayed that way for 2 years, and then got lured back into work as editor of the Nebraska Examiner, which is a nonprofit online journalism site that focuses on state issues and state government for the most part. So that's my history.
Yeah, I worked with Cate at the World Herald I wanted to be Cate. I wanted to work at the World Herald for 40 years. And after 6, I looked around and realized that was a bad bet. And so I left and I went to a place called MedPage Today, which is actually lovely to have at least half of you be medical folks. From there, I went to USA Today, and I was there for probably, honestly, 18 months before I started being like, this is not my scene. Nebraska, I need to get back to Nebraska. I need to be doing Nebraska stuff. And so we started fundraising for Flatwater Free Press, and we've been doing that for 2 years, almost to the day, July 1st. So that's what I got.
I'm Dr. Dre Jones. I do family med. In particularly North Omaha, and a lot of inpatient at the main campus. I'm also on the Douglas County Board of Health, and particularly during COVID, of course, a lot of us physicians who did not have any kind of training in media or dealing with these kind of issues had to kind of train ourselves in whatever way that looked like for our communities that we serve. So I consider myself a trusted physician in the community and really trying to advocate for my patients and educate to the best of my ability and knowledge with things changing on a daily basis. Did my best. And so that's what I'm here as and what I can offer. But I am certainly no expert in media and medicine.
Okay, thanks, panelists. You can thank Paul Paulman for this, but he said I should tell a lawyer joke, so I did go to my phone, and so guy walks into the bar with his alligator, and he comes up to the bartender and he says, do you serve lawyers? And the guy says, sure. And he says, give me a beer and bring me a lawyer, please, for the alligator. Okay, I'm done. Paul. So I did a little homework on this thing. I saw a survey, and it was in The Economist and something called YouGov. They asked Americans where they got their news from and how much they trusted the prominent media organizations. So anybody want to venture a guess as to what is the most trusted news source among Americans overall?
Fox.
All right, well, the answer is the Weather Channel, believe it or not. I'm just going to run through a few things here. The Weather Channel is just one of two outlets that polled that a majority of Republicans trusted. The only other one that they trusted is Fox News. 56% of Republicans trusted Fox News. 44% say they trust ABC, 43% trust CBS, 42% NBC, 40% trust CNN, and now they got a new CEO that's, God only knows, they're probably going even lower. 38% overall trust Fox, and 36% trust MSNBC. So that's almost like a 40% is about the average of what people trust these days in the media, which is just, it's mind-boggling to me. And here's one other thing, and then we'll start bringing the panelists in, but there is a 91-point difference between how Democrats and Republicans feel about MSNBC. Democrats are plus 54% and Republicans are negative 37%. So you can see there's a total divide on what people believe. So back in my day, and I'm sure Cate and Matt and anybody who's been in journalism, can you imagine your assignment editor, you come to work and he says, hey Matt, I want you to go out and do a story on this COVID thing that's going on, and do as much misleading journalism as you can so that we can really get people messed up. I mean, I mean, you guys are not in the business of telling lies or fabricating stories, so why does everybody mistrust the media these days? So, generic question. Somebody jump in here.
Good Lord.
I mean, is it what has happened that has caused this mistrust issue?
I really think politics has gotten involved, and I do think there's, the way I look at it is, people, I believe, trust their local news much more. It's when you get to the national news, it's so far removed from you, it's strangers, you have no connection with them, and it's much easier to distrust them. But I think we did have politics get in the middle of people and their televisions or their newspapers and their radios, and all of a sudden they started getting frustrated with not seeing themselves reflected or their views reflected, and it just kept getting more angry and more distrustful. And all of a sudden we kind of all started going to our silos, and we felt comfortable talking to people who had similar views, and all of a sudden we didn't hear from or talk to people with other points of view except to get angry at them. And I just feel like that's where we are now. I do think it's better on the local front.
Yeah.
People know us, or we're talking about people they know, and it makes a difference.
Yeah, there is a difference. If you look at the numbers, you talked about the national outlets. If you look at local news, they are generally more trusted. Now, they're not going to be 98%. That is simply not true. That doesn't happen anymore. But they are more trusted than some of those things. And I think politics is the reason, right? I do think that there is something, nefarious, whereby even local politicians, or certainly national politicians, spin, right? Spin is the major national thing. No, yeah, we are constantly being, someone is trying to spin a story, tell us a story to then tell. And that's not getting us anywhere. The minute we start carrying water for anybody else, if we ignore that story, we did it because we dislike them. And if we take that story, we did it because, well, we're obviously in their pocket, be they liberal, be they conservative, whatever the case may be. It's a no-win situation once media was seen as a tool rather than a medium, right? I just think we're in a, and then you throw on obviously social media, which I know we're going to talk about as another layer of competing narratives that are out there. What is truth? I don't know. There's 500 truths. How are we supposed to do a single story about COVID or whatever else the case may be?
Another term that's kind of become, go ahead, Pete.
Patrick had something to say.
Oh, well, I just want to talk about the elephant in the room, which is the internet and big tech, because as much as people do or don't trust what's become known as the mainstream media, it's much more possible in today's world to filter information so that you only get news that you agree with. Now, I'm pretty middle of the road. I was counting back in 11 presidential elections, and I've voted for them all, voted in them all, voted for 5 Republicans and 6 Democrats. So I'm about as middle of the road as it gets. However, I've got relatives with whom it is impossible to have a conversation about anything political, because the line between opinion and fact has almost disappeared. Well, I think most of the doctors, and correct me if I'm wrong, would agree that the MMR vaccine is a good thing. You should give that to your kids. I wish the mumps vaccine had existed when I was a kid, because I got them and they hurt. Unfortunately for the rest of the world, they did not inhibit my ability to reproduce. But so the reason I think people don't trust what we've come to know as the mainstream sources is, I mean, they're talking about completely different things. And then I'll just say a word again about what I got alluded to a second ago, which is social media. And the elephant in the room, I think, is Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which was passed in 1996. And for those of you who can remember the internet back then, there were bulletin boards, and like Prodigy bulletin boards, and you could post message up there. It was like a bulletin board. And so the worry was that the owners of those bulletin boards would be liable for defamatory or otherwise hurtful information that was on there. So Congress passed what are called the 26 words that launched the internet. Here they are: no provider or user of an interactive computer service shall be treated as the publisher or speaker of any information provided by another information content provider. So that means that, if you had a Prodigy bulletin board and somebody puts up something defamatory, you're not liable. That made sense then. But today, people argue with some force that big tech like YouTube, like Facebook, like Twitter, they actually are content generators, because they have algorithms that will feed you what you want to see. So I think if we're ever going to get back to having some kind of discussion that's rational, there have to be some sensible amendments to Section 230, because as things stand now, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, they're essentially immune. In fact, there was a Supreme Court decision just last month against all of those platforms by victims of ISIS attacks, who alleged correctly that those platforms had allowed pro-ISIS content on there and benefited from it. And they alleged that they should be able to recover against them. Now, the Supreme Court said no, and didn't get into Section 230, but just said the nexus was too large. But I think if we're going to get back to a better place, we have to have some more incentive on big tech to monitor itself and not allow for these wild-haired theories to get out there. So anyway.
This may be neither here nor there, and just cut me off if need be, but I have zero faith for Congress to do anything. So I think Section 230, we're probably just stuck with it, right? But I still think that there's, like, if you look locally over the past 6 months, we have examples where it's not some anonymous person on a major internet provider's site. It is a person with a radio show in Lincoln, for example, having people accuse candidates of things that are demonstrably false. And lawyers get involved and say, you can't do that. We're going to sue you if you don't correct the record, if you don't do. We have tools at our disposal right now that we are not using adequately to stop misinformation. And I think we've gotten a little gun shy. You know, I was sued. I don't know if you guys remember the Sandman guy. Remember this photo of a kid in a MAGA hat who went toe to toe with a older Native American man? That kid sued me because I did a story about it. And you know what? That's probably okay. He can sue me. I didn't do anything wrong. And, you know, the courts decided that I didn't do anything wrong. But I'm okay with that. I think that if we're using the remedies that are available to us, our laws as they are right now are actually pretty good. Truth is truth. Truth is a defense, an absolute defense in these cases. And as long as you stick to that, you are okay. It's when you bring someone on your radio show who is actively lying, yeah, that's indefensible. That is something that can be corrected by the law as it exists.
Well, there are limits on that, though, because in order to prove a defamation claim by a public figure, you'd have to show actual malice, meaning that not just that it was wrong, but they were recklessly false or knew it was false. So those cases are, frankly, hard to win, particularly for political candidates. I remember my friend Rex Moats, who was on the wrong side of some, I think, non-factual attacks in his run for legislature. I mean, he actually did sue, and Nebraska Supreme Court ruled against him. So I'm hearing what you're saying. I'm just saying defamation cases are hard to win. They're really hard to win.
Patrick, maybe, I know you sent us an example when we did our pre-work, but this Dominion Fox News lawsuit that was just settled was kind of interesting, and that, to me, it, in essence, I guess Fox was admitting that they messed up.
They didn't admit it, but they paid $800 million. So, I was really disappointed when that settled because I had the popcorn all popped. I couldn't wait to watch that one. But, Fox's defense was, we're just reporting on what other people are saying, but turned out not really to be true. In fact, they were amplifying some statements. And it still amazes me that people still don't understand this stuff in text and stuff in emails never goes away. All kinds of things that would have been water cooler discussions back in the 1980s, and memories might have gotten a little foggy, look a little different when it's a text saying that you're going to go on the air and say something that's clearly wrong. So I would like to see that trial. I can understand why Dominion took $800 million. That's kind of a hard offer to pass up, but that would have been an interesting one. We may get another one with Smartmatic, the other election machinery maker. I'm sure there's some better term for it than that, but they've also sued Fox, so maybe that one will go to trial.
So we had this little thing called a pandemic, I guess, back in 2020. And Dr. Jones, I'd like to get you involved in this a little bit, but I guess how do you, when someone comes into your office and starts questioning some of the stuff that's going on in the media, what is a doctor supposed to do?
Sure. So I'm sure a lot of us in this room have had a significant amount of frustration and burnout related to this. I know I have, and I've had to check myself on many occasions about that and the bias that I may bring into the exam room, because I truly feel that I'm there to look out for the health and well-being of the patient in front of me at that moment and do whatever I can to keep them alive and keep them healthy. And so it's really hard when you have that relationship with a patient and it becomes tarnished. And sometimes I feel like some of the relationships that I've formed over years where you trust me for your diabetes and your high blood pressure and everything else, but why not with COVID, right? And why suddenly do you believe some random person on the internet about an unproven treatment or go on about vaccine hesitancy when I'm here and I truly care about your well-being and I want to see you do the best that you can with your body in this life. So it's been a challenge. I've had to have situations where I have to ask permission because patients are so shut down and they don't want to hear it. And I've had people who have gotten up and walked out when it becomes too heated for that moment. But I continue to listen and empathize and ask what are their goals, right? And focus on what truly matters to them and what are their real concerns here so that we can try to get to the bottom of those and address them one at a time. And I just keep coming back. It's like smoking, right? If you smoke and you come see me, every single time you see me, I will always encourage you to quit smoking. Just like if you haven't had your COVID shot yet, I will always bring it up and just try to ask why, what's preventing you at this moment. So it has affected our patient-doctor relationships. It has affected our well-being as providers. I think the trust also that the public sees, I think when we think about doctors a long time ago, everybody believed what you said and you don't question it, right? But now this generation in particular believes that they know best. And it's really hard sometimes to confront those beliefs and talk some sense into people.
Nice. Well, go ahead. One of the amazing things I thought during the pandemic was just the public's sentiment towards Dr. Fauci, and I, I guess I have to say I sided with Dr. Fauci. I thought he did a great job, and I think he did as best as he could. Everybody was kind of learning as we go on this thing, but I can't. I mean, to me, it was absolutely astonishing how he became such a polarizing agent, and I kind of feel sorry for him because in essence he kind of seems like he's been shoved off to the sidelines now, and I don't know. I think he really meant well, and I guess I don't know if the panel want to jump in on that or some of the stuff that went on during that with Fauci. They had the mask thing early on, and he said you didn't need to wear a mask, and then the next minute they changed their mind, and I suppose that didn't probably help his stock that much.
Legal expert. I am not a legal expert, but my observation is that I think the medical profession, or especially at the Fauci level, I just can't help thinking that they were damaged simply because this was such an unknown quantity, and you were seeing the research develop on your television, shows practically, and so as knowledge evolved, advice would change, and a portion of the population just couldn't understand that. And I think that harmed the overall view of the experts, even though it was obvious that, yeah, they didn't know anything about it and they were learning and their knowledge and advice was evolving. So what is the problem here? But it really seemed to create this part of what created the wedge in the public views.
Yeah, I think back to like early on, and I'd always be very open and honest with folks, like, this is what I know in this moment, and things change day to day, just with anything else in medicine. Nothing is 100% medically certain. So I take the evidence-based knowledge that I can find and know in that moment and provide you with those recommendations. And so I think that was also helpful for people to know that, like, I don't have all the answers. No one does. But here's what we do know, and I care about you. And does the person on the internet necessarily care about your health and well-being in the same way? And so I think that can sometimes help to be a little bit of a buffer.
Patrick, you're telling us a little bit about hydroxychloroquine. Or...
Yeah, well, no, I didn't take it. I'll say this about Dr. Fauci. I was very much in his camp in the sense that I thought they were doing the best on limited information. I fear that what has happened in hindsight is that people have come to associate him with the things they didn't like, none of us liked, the lockdowns, the masks, et cetera, during the height of the pandemic, and have forgotten how dangerous it was. I remember going onto Facebook actually, and with a back of the envelope calculation early on, calculating that 700,000 Americans would die as a result of COVID. And I wish I'd been right. It was quite a bit low, actually. But that estimate was mocked. And I didn't go back on to gloat when we got over 700,000. But people did get their information in some, shall we say, suboptimal ways. There was one very sad story about a couple who had heard the talk about hydroxychloroquine. They read the label of their fish tank cleaner and thought it contained hydroxychloroquine. So they each drank half of it and they both died. I don't think anybody died listening to Tony Fauci. And I had a lot of sympathy for the medical profession because, we were all learning as we were going. And nobody knew how fast it spread. Nobody knew when a vaccine was realistic. There were the analogies to AIDS where there's never been a vaccine. Was it ever going to happen? Were we ever going to get back to normal? So I think, memories change over time because there's a certain presidential candidate now in one of the major parties his platform is basically anti-Fauci. Even though he had nice things to say about Fauci early on. But what this candidate, I think, is pushing on is remember how terrible it was when we all had to stay indoors. That, I think, is the unfortunate part of it. So, anyway.
Good answer. Dr. Jones, you touched on something a few minutes ago, and I think maybe the rest of the panel would want to get into this a little bit. One of the stats I dug up was 74% of baby boomers trust the healthcare system some or a lot, but that number drops to 44% among members of Generation Z. Those are folks that are born between the late 1990s and early 2010. So that these are the kids that are 20 to 40 years old, basically, are the ones that are truly the most skeptical of all the people in the world. It sounds like it's Generation Z. I don't know. Is anybody Generation Z in the room here?
Kids these days.
Not Generation Z. As much as I like to think I am. TikTok and things, and that's where I think that media really can work to benefit us, right? Like if you get some doctors on there that are providing accurate evidence-based medicine and advice in their specialty, that's where I really feel like we can counter some of this and it can be beneficial. But it is true that I have a lot of patients who come in and said, I need this Wegovy because I saw it on TikTok. So it's a thing. Wegovy is a weight loss medication for all the lawyers in the room that may not be familiar.
What is it?
Wegovy or
What is-
Ozempic,
On the weight loss trend.
Oh,
Trulicity.
all right.
There's a lot of them out there right now.
Yeah, a little stat on social media, but how much do Americans generally have a net negative view on trustworthiness of news shared on prominent social media platforms? TikTok -36, Snapchat -26, Facebook, I guess, is most trusted of them all, is at -22. So, I'm married into a family that we don't talk politics at events anymore, and it's just it's so sad to me that goes on. And Matt, I know you'd mentioned your mother, and we're not alone. I mean, it's so I don't know. I guess the question is, what is the best way? Should we talk it out as a family, or just ignore it and make it go away? I hope it goes away.
I don't know, to be clear. I have no idea. But I think what's so fascinating about this conversation is that we've got journalists, lawyers, and medical professionals all in the same place. We are all woefully ill-equipped to deal with, hydroxychloroquine. Who made that up and why? I don't know. None of us know. We have no antidote, not a medical professional, for that, for a purposeful lie. And that stuff, I don't know if you guys saw this today, Dr. Fauci, our friend, this DeSantis fellow who's running for president, has created a series of doctored images of Trump and Fauci embracing, shaking hands, et cetera, et cetera. That's as fake as it gets. I just gave that oxygen. I just gave that energy. That is a win for his campaign, right? I don't have an answer. We're just barely even scratching the surface. Have you seen some of these deep fakes of any of these candidates where we're just making up video, audio of them speaking? If you're in a position of arguing for truth, what do you even do? What do you do? I'm asking, please tell me, what do we do?
I don't have the answer.
Hey, what do we do? Yeah.
Well, I don't know what we can do with some of that. I do think it's so important to understand what your news source is and to look more than the surface, but to be skeptical news consumers and to challenge what we see, which is maybe what's going on with Gen Z. I think they have so much cynicism because of what's happened in their lives that it's led to that. But I just think it's not going to change unless the American public starts examining what they're hearing, what they're seeing, and go beyond just what's popping up as an alert on their smartphone and examining where this information came from. But
The Examiner would be a great name for an outlet.
I'll think about that.
Well, I wish we could get back to talking. I've got some of the same relative problem, and foolishly in passing said to one of them, I'm sure glad the debt ceiling thing got resolved and got rebuffed with, that was a complete sellout. Well, I mean, how's that a conversation starter? I mean, you're not going to get anywhere with that. So I do hope we can get back to being able to have those kinds of conversations. I think, unfortunately, the political parties have become so polarized that it's harder to have those conversations. And maybe some of the more sensible middle will emerge. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when politicians like Robert Byrd or Bob Dole or what have you were revered for their ability to work across the aisle and get things done, and now they'd be traitors. I mean, they just be branded as traitors by their own party. So,
I'm going to piggyback on this point about talking to each other. We're trying some weird stuff at Flatwater, and one of the weird things that we've tried is we call it journalism on stage. When you do a story, here's how it works. You talk to experts. You talk to Dr. Jones. You talk to people who know what they're talking about. You put them in a story. You report what they said, and people read that. That is traditional journalism. Read that, view it on TV, however that's going to work. We thought, well, what if we did that, but like in person? So got a bunch of experts and sat them in front of a room of people, invited them to come, and they could ask questions, and they could hear the experts. And what happens then? The last time we did this was in Norfolk, And it was about nitrates in water in Nebraska, which is an issue that we've had a reporter really dig into over the past couple months. And Norfolk is the heart of this thing, right? That is a place where nitrate levels have more than doubled. They're at outrageous, there's, I think, 5 water systems up there that are on, they don't have a municipal water system because it's too freaking dirty. They can't. So we did this. We brought out Dr. Jesse Bell. We brought out a rancher who is actually in the place. We had people on the NRDs, the water treatment government entities that oversee this stuff. And we just had a conversation. And I thought, okay, we're talking water policy, the most boring thing that I can imagine on the entire planet. The 6 people in this room are going to have a blast, though. 300 people showed up, and they did not agree. We had ranchers, and we had lefty environmentalists who just think, I don't even know what they think. They did not agree on anything, and we had the most cordial, open, honest disagreement, but, it lasted for an hour and a half. It was scheduled for an hour. It lasted an hour and a half. And people stuck around for an hour and a half afterwards to talk to each other across, what I would assume are party lines. But this is a topic that transcends politics. It hasn't been politicized yet. And I think that's maybe why that worked. That we haven't had CNN or Fox tell us where to stand on this yet. And so that's why we could have a real adult conversation.
Good. Patrick, you use a term before we came up here today, but the medical quackery, that how, in essence, say anti-vaxxers, I mean, really, this is something that's can really undermine the health professions and really can hurt people.
Well, it certainly can. I mean, the very unfortunate example I gave you of the couple that drank the fish tank stuff, but I think a much larger problem, and I'll defer to my medical colleagues on this, I do think is the refusal of a substantial number of people to get their children immunized. And we've begun to lose herd immunity. I mean, when I was a kid, I didn't know if anybody ever got whooping cough. And now, it runs rampant in some schools. So I get back to the point before that I think the line between fact and opinion has gotten blurred because, the fact that the, MMR vaccine or DPT or whatever it is in general good for your kid is as far as I know, that's factually true. But I constantly hear people say, well, I'm doing my own research into it. Well, no, you're not. Okay. You're not researching the effectiveness of tetanus vaccines. You don't know anything about that. You're just surfing the net. And the fact that people get information like that, and then when you try to tell them that they're objectively wrong about that, they say, well, that's just your opinion. It's a matter of opinion. Now, facts are things that can be falsified or not. I mean, it is factually false that I have a redwood tree growing in my backyard, right? You can go look, there's no redwood tree. It's factually true that the MMR vaccine is good for the vast majority of children. But people want to turn that into opinion and a debating point. And I think unfortunately, my medical colleagues have taken a huge brunt of that.
Carol, do you want to open it up to questions on the floor at all, or does anybody want to throw something out? We'd love to hear from you.
I'm sorry to be one of the people here that's going to ask a question when I shouldn't. I should leave it to you guys. But about the future of the media, and you guys run nonprofit media organizations. We're talking about the for-profit media organizations as the trust factor. You don't do things to make money. You don't write stories to make money. You don't have 30 reporters talking about Husker football in the middle of June. Is that the future? Is that people will trust when you're not selling them something or doing something for money when it comes to media? Is it going to catch on?
I hope so. I I haven't really thought about it in those terms, or whether we're more trustworthy because we are not trying to turn a profit. I know a lot of honorable, strong journalists who are working for for-profit news organizations, and I think they do excellent work, and they certainly, in the newsroom I spent my career in, there was never any talk of, how much money will this story make the newspaper. But I do think that we're trying to do good journalism and share that journalism. We consider it as a nonprofit news outlet. We look at what we're doing as a public service, and that is somewhat different from for-profit news groups. But I just think it's incredibly important to do that strong journalism and to keep, as your in-person conversation does, we try very hard to get a variety of viewpoints. And I think that's the only way. You just have to keep trying to get the spectrum of news and views out there. And I've had people who will complain to me, for example, about a commentary that I ran. And so my answer is to invite that person to write a commentary with their points of view. I don't let people bash each other, but it's like, tell me from your perspective, what are the answers here? And I'm gratified when they do that, because I think it makes it a richer mix of information for our readers.
Is it the future? I don't think media news as a thing exists anymore. Is the sad is the fact. The World Herald, the Examiner, Flatwater, Silicon Prairie News, they are all equal playing field here in the year of our Lord 2023, right? We chuckleheads can make up a thing and all of a sudden get so many page views that we are going toe to toe, if not exceeding what the newspaper that's been around since our great great grandpa came here, can do as well. That's astonishing, and that's a heck of a responsibility. To your question about is it the future? No. Is it a growing part of the future? Absolutely, 110%. Before I came back to Omaha in 2011 or whatever, 2009, so 2008, I don't know if you guys remember this, the entire economy went to hell in a handbasket. It was a thing. It happened. You can Google it. In the wake of that, a whole bunch of people at newspapers at the time said, well, this is bad. We are investigative reporters. We spend 18 months on a story, and we get paid for that time. And then at the end, we might have a story or we might not, and they're important, and they put people in prison, and they change laws, and it really matters. And that business model doesn't make sense anymore. And so in 2009, 27 of these dorks got together at a conference, probably much like this, somewhere in upstate New York, and they put together a declaration about, good Lord, something's got to give for news. And out of that came things like ProPublica, the Texas Tribune, and 25 others. Some of them don't exist anymore. Some of them obviously are wildly successful. So 2009, 27, that is one number that I can tell you, a data point. 2019, when we started looking at joining the Institute for Nonprofit News, as that organization is called, there were 335. It's 2023 now, and there are 575. So the pace at which this is happening, this revolution, I mean, look at Nebraska. We started in September 2021, July 2021. Examiner came around January 2022.
Correct.
Sunrise News, I don't know if anyone remembers, that. That was February 2022. They weren't nonprofit, and I think they should have been. I'll also say that I actually kind of wanted that to work, because I do think, as much as we can bemoan that there's Fox News and CNN, look, sometimes CNN misses it, and Fox News has the real thing. There's value to that. So it's kind of a shame that they only lasted for 6 to 8 weeks or whatever that was. I am way off script, and I can just keep going.
Anybody else out there want to chime in?
Well, I think we are really in need of some political financial reform, but I don't know if we will get it. I think it's shocking that we will allow organizations to spend huge sums of money and not be required to say where they got that money, who's giving, who's donating to them, and the donors act like poor little me. You can't tell them my name because then people will be mean to me. It's like, well, aren't you being mean to somebody else with this money? I think it's very dismaying. And as a lifelong Nebraskan, I do hate to see these outside influences come in, because when I grew up, it was Nebraskans were independent and proud of it, and you weren't going to tell us what to do. And the legislature was a place where people from across the spectrum knew they needed to work together, and that's really changed in the last couple of years or few years.
I can bring a certain expertise to this because in 2016, I broke the record for the most money raised of any losing legislative candidate in the history of Nebraska. I lost by 109 votes out of about 6,000. And God, am I glad I did. So I'm all for getting money out of politics, 100%. I'm with you.
It's a good question. Anybody else out there? All kinds of questions. Dr. Bender?
I was really struck by something that I heard Dr. Jones say, that when she talks with her patients, she'll say, I'm giving you some advice based on what I know, and it's there to help you. I don't know everything. And it struck me that it's very important when we're talking about medical issues, particularly emerging issues, that we talk not just about what we know, but admit that there's some things we don't know. And I wonder if more emphasis on saying, well, we just don't know the answer to some things needs to be more important message that would come out of journalism, even though it might be a boring message or not as exciting as, here's the answer to. I just wonder how you feel about that.
I will often encourage my reporter. I'll say, what about this? Did you ask this question? And they'll say, yes, but they didn't know the answer. And I said, well, I think it's important that you say that then. Let's acknowledge that we did ask that question, and that the sources we talked to had not decided that yet, or didn't know the answer. I totally agree with you that it's very easy to come across as, we know it all and we'll tell you what we know, instead of explaining that there are some things that simply aren't known yet.
Do you guys remember that book, The Medium is the Message, or something, Marshall McLuhan, that whole thing? Yeah. I think there is something, in newspaper days, the newspaper has to come out every day, and there has to be filled with stories about things that we now know. We didn't know anything half the time. I mean, Jesus, I wrote how many stories and I didn't know anything ever. We aren't in that world anymore, right? The medium has evolved. We do not have to fill a print product every day to sell ads just for our salary. I mean, I love newspaper journalism a lot, but that business model really optimized for some poor outcomes. One of the goofy things, I said we do some weird stuff at Flatwater. One of the goofy things that we do is we do not publish a story every day, because some days there's nothing worth saying. Some days we don't know anything worth saying. Some days we haven't been able to get an answer, and we're working on something that we think justifies the time, right? We need that time. That's not a perfect answer, but that's what I can do. That's what I can do. I can say, nothing to see here, guys. Go play with your kids. I don't know. Have fun. I don't think that journalism remains a business, whether it's nonprofit, they all have to make money. And I think the beauty of nonprofit is that we can say, we don't need your page views today. We have subscribers who support what we do, and that pays everyone's salary, and that allows us to pay rent and have parking and all the things that we need. We don't need to just do what we've always done. We have the opportunity to do something different, and how exciting is that? Because of things like this, we can do something different. Let's do something different.
Sorry, but we always have news. Nebraska Examiner. sometimes I ask people, stop writing. They say, but I've got this good story. So anyway, we're a little different in that regard.
Question out there. Go ahead.
Spent a lot of time talking about disinformation, misinformation, blurring of the line between fact and opinion. I mean, I've seen a lot of news articles recently. We have an attorney facing discipline for utilizing artificial intelligence to write his brief, and they gave him false case citations. I received targeted ads for products that they say have utilized artificial intelligence to select the most beneficial medical ingredient for XYZ condition. Do you have any opinions or concerns on the impact of artificial intelligence on this already difficult area that we've been discussing tonight?
As a professional, I just say it scares the heck out of me. I don't understand it. I don't trust it. I was talking to somebody before this, and my son decided to query some AI source on a story that our family knows very well. And the answers came back were ludicrously wrong, outrageously wrong. My husband was in the Marine Corps, and he befriended a donkey when he was serving in Iraq. He came home, eventually retired, started thinking about all the Marines he knew, and then he thought about this donkey that he knew and decided he was going to bring this donkey from Iraq to Omaha. And he's a very determined person, and it took 9 months and lots of help, but he got it done. And because he's a very determined person, he made me write a book about this. And so my son asked, what happened to Smoke the donkey? And in reality, Smoke the donkey came and lived in Omaha until he died peacefully at a farm up near Fort Calhoun. But the AI source said that he was the victim of an IED in Iraq. And it's just like, what? but the scary thing was it provided the name of my book. And so as if here's a source on this information. And so I have one example or one experience with AI, and it scares the heck out of me. I don't know how anyone can trust it. Oh.
I guess the medical side of it, I see as like, are you going to trust Dr. Google, or are you going to go see your doctor and talk about it? Like, you're going to get all sorts of things. You don't have that filter. You don't have someone you trust. So I guess that's where I see it.
I will say that a very bright young man who's working for me right now, who's just graduated from the University of Nebraska, Lincoln, he does use AI, or chat GBT or whatever it is. And so people of his generation do find value in this, but I'm not sure how they can come to trust it.
Oh, it is fabulous for recommendation letters, hiring things, all that HR gobbledygook where there are words but no one actually reads them. Fabulous. I think we do more than we get credit for, first of all. Both of us have correction policies, right? If we get something wrong and someone can prove that we got something wrong, we will correct it ASAP. Legally, we have to. Otherwise, we can be sued and lose our shirt. We carry libel insurance in case we say anything that is false or whatever. We have to, and our premiums go up if we are proven to be bad actors. All that stuff exists, and I think we, as an industry, have done a really poor job of telling people, no, look, we really try to get things right, and we are punished when we get them wrong. Can we do, I mean, I'm sure we could learn. So I would actually like to explore if there's things we can learn from both your professions, honestly. But I think our marketing, as much as we're in the business of just telling stories and telling people stuff all the time, we've done a really awful job telling our own. I mean, the SPJ Code of Ethics has like, 50 things that we can and can't do, can't misrepresent, can't, wear disguises into a thing and say, yeah, my name is Jim Smith, please tell. We can't do that stuff. We're a member of the Institute for Nonprofit News. They've got a whole litany of things that we can't have donations over $5,000 without putting a person's name to it, for example. We're wildly transparent. It would be interesting to explore more. I think something could come of that, but there's all sorts of, we're a profession. We are a profession as much as we're jokers. We are professionals.
Yeah. And I would say for our organization, there is a code of ethics, and I think journalists aren't as organized as some other professions, and we're kind of independent cusses somewhat too. But there are professional organizations, and you should be able to find out. I think what I like about our site is we'll tell you who we are. We have biographical information, which on each of our employees, it explains their education and their professional background, and so that's there. It's not as organized as what you're talking about, and it's an interesting idea. But on the other hand, I don't really want to belong to a union of sorts as far as that goes. But I agree with Matt that we don't really probably share those resources or tools or codes of ethics as much as we should, and so it's hard to see to our readership.
Anybody else out there? I've got one last question, maybe, Carol. I get the sense we're probably getting towards the end here, but as a PR person, I was wondering if the panel would like to talk a little bit about public relations and what you're feeling about PR. Is it lost its I mean, is the rose coming off its bloom a little bit like maybe the journalism or media is these days?
I think good public relations professionals are very helpful, and they can give journalists information and access to sources, story suggestions. But it's like anything else. You've got to assess the validity of the person. It helps if you know people. It helps if you can contact them and ask specific questions. And they're not all created equal. Some are better than others. And I think in particular, for example, your former job was very helpful because you have all of these professional experts, and they don't trust reporters to get it right sometimes, and PR people can be a great go-between between those and make sure that we can say things as accurately as possible that are also understandable to the general reader.
There is an old World Herald reporter by the name of Mary McGrath, who I'm sure, Cate, you probably worked with Mary, but she was a health reporter for many years at the World Herald, and really a great reporter. And Mary, and I think other health reporters do the same thing, but I mean, when they get a press release from a PR person, basically they know that there's a spin going on there, that they're building up that institution that they represent, and they're doing everything they can to make it look good. But any reporter is probably going to go back out and try to find out what are the competition doing. Are they so that's part of the game too, is that they know. I think that PRs, we've got our own little side dish going on, and everybody's got their own little spin. Andrew, you're right.
Yeah, I just wanted to put one little last plug in for everyone too, that UNMC has an amazing service through their Magoogan library. It's the Health Information Service, and it's actually available to assist all Nebraskans to find accurate health information. So you just go on the website, put in what you're wanting to know more about as far as a health condition, and it will send you information for free. So I did want to also, I offer that to my patients that this is something that's reliable and accurate that you can go to get good information.
I think we're good. I want to say thanks to the panelists. These guys were fantastic.